agree with Ken as well. Like I still stand with, I think we shouldn't. And for me, it's about your rights and your freedom to do so. Like for us to remove that, that's just like me telling you, you need to put on a mask. I mean, so I think that that's treading the line a little too much. I know we want to always think sometimes as council people, like we use our authority to say this we can and we're going to implement that. But I think that's one freedom and right that we shouldn't be doing. I look at it from a different perspective. And um, as a woman, I wouldn't want nobody trying to tell me that, well, we want you to commit to be the caretaker, but we don't want you to run for office and, or, managing my reproductive rights or anything. So I look at it from a whole different perspective. And I think that when it comes to council, we should, like I get all that back what happened 12 years ago and 8 years ago and 4 years ago. But I believe our council is forward thinking. And I believe that we, should give people the opportunity to, if that's what they choose, we shouldn't take that away from them. But again, we at the heels of the total body of the council. I'm just one of 8. So, but I do thank you for listening and hearing me and your willingness to at least, schedule another meeting so we can dive into it further.
Absolutely. Councilman Hester.
I want to echo the same sentiments of Councilwoman Coonrod and Councilman Smith. That thank you for all the work you put into this, Chairman. And it was not a slight on you. And I don't think that person should be limited in not running. They should be for the opportunity to run for the office. And let me say this, I'm going to miss Mr. Love is Love. It's really going to miss Anthony Bird. He's a character. We're going to miss him. Thank you. That's
Thank you. Yeah. Council, and there's a fine line between being a leader and a dictator. I certainly want to offer leadership. I certainly don't want to be a dictator. And in offering leadership, I simply put forward what I felt like was the best process, but I do not want to be a dictator to the point of us saying, this is how we're going to do it. And I'm hearing from the council some concerns about the recommendations that are the requirements that we may or may not put on those people seeking to fill this seat. And I'm certainly willing to go back and look at this again next week. So, Madam Clerk, we will have a special called strategic planning meeting next week. Council, do you think 2:00 is still adequate time to discuss that? On the 8th, I think that we presentation from each of these candidates. We may want to give a little bit longer time period. I don't know, between if we take the requirements off, I think it becomes a more critical decision in that we could quite possibly be selecting the person that fills that seat in the election. Is it seat vacant and directing the election commission to put it on the ballot? So we will keep that timeline in place. Applicants for the or people interested in running for that seat will still be able to pick up their papers at the election commission the day following that we get the resolution to them, directing them to put it on the ballot, and they will have until April the 7th to qualify. So, Madam Clerk, so next week at 2:00, we'll have a special called strategic planning meeting for the purpose of discussing the process of replacing the council person. Councilwoman Burrs.
Just a timeline question, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So let's say we go ahead next week, we decide one way or the other. When are you talking about people what could be their campaign speeches here.
So that would not change as well. We would still begin taking applications and, well, letters of interest and resumes from interested parties. On the 16th of February, we'd begin receiving letters. And then we would take those for a period of 2 weeks until noon on March the 1st. So noon on March the 1st, we would cut off the application process. And then we would have from March the 1st, as of right now, till the following week to interview or to.
So all I'm asking is because I think that if we make it open, you have to give everyone equal time, and it could be equal time for everyone to make a campaign speech because,
Well, that's what I'm saying on
I
the,
mean, I'm
yes.
not sure you're giving enough time. That's all I'm
You're
saying.
talking about that they need more than 3 minutes on the 8th?
No. Well, let's say you have 20 people.
Right, okay.
I mean, I don't know, because remember, it takes on more importance. It could be a campaign speech.
Well, it
if
will
that's
be.
the
It
way
will
we
be a
go.
campaign. It will be a
All right.
campaign speech. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if we take off the
The requirements.
yeah,
Yeah,
then it really is a campaign
it
speech.
is, yeah.
All right. And I'm just saying that we may want to think about how much time we set aside so that everybody has equal opportunity
I
to
agree.
give a campaign speech.
Yeah. Well, and we'll bring that up and we'll discuss that
Okay.
next week as well.
Yeah, I just didn't want to put that schedule in stone until we really thought about
Well,
that.
we can put the application process in stone.
Sure. I'm good with that.
And,
Thank you.
and then the selection process may take on a little bit different schedule. All right, I'm not seeing any other lights about the confirmation of Councilman Byrd or the process, so we'll move on to our regular agenda. Julia, I think the first thing on our agenda is the public safety update on the 4th Avenue building fire, and maybe we have some codes people here as well to sort of discuss. Good. Afternoon, Chief. We're going to have a state of the art council room here in just a few months. Well, a few months meaning what, Ellis? 6 December. Okay. Like I said, a few months. Yeah, this year. Go ahead.
Just a quick update on 4th Avenue fire. I want to start with our firefighter that was injured. Lieutenant Mark Kaufman did sustain some injuries from the blast in front of this building. He got hit with a bunch of bricks as they were exiting the scene. He did sustain, and he didn't mind me sharing this information, he did sustain a fracture to his T3 with no compromise of his spine or anything like that. So they're expecting a full recovery. He goes back to his orthopedic in February, and we hope to have him back at work pretty quick. And I am super happy to be reporting that kind of information because that could have been extremely tragic in a completely different way and one of the worst phone calls I could ever have to make to a family. And those are the things that we train for right there alone. We know about clap zones. We know about the dangerous properties that are out there that really affect firefighter safety and civilian safety. And it's something that we've always been aware of it, and we know that those dangers are ever present. And this was a good wake-up call for a lot of folks because it was a close call. That's as close of a call that we can have. and not really get somebody hurt or killed. And it was really an eye opener, not only for our department, something that will be going in a lot of our training bulletins as well, and some of the upcoming trainings that we're doing. But certainly something that we definitely pay attention to. And I thank the council and I thank all the mayor staff for checking on our firefighter, all the well wishes, the texts and everything else, checking on our firefighters and making sure they're safe. Unfortunately, we did find a victim in the fire later on. As you know, when these buildings are in this kind of condition, if you see the picture there on the left, that kind of condition alone, we can't send firefighters in there safely when buildings are in that kind of dilapidated shape. And that's exactly what happened in this instance. All the way back to 2017, all the way up through February of 2020, we've run a number of EMS calls there, and it is likely related to homeless people living in these structures that we've responded on. We had a building fire back in 2021, in August of 2021. The rubbish fire in November is likely a warming fire in that same structure. Fortunately, we were able to get the structure condemned in December of 2021. And then we obviously had the larger building fire that only left us with the option of completely tearing down the building to make it safe. And you can see what's left of that structure now. And a thanks to the mayor's staff and a thanks to Donna Castile and that whole bunch for keeping us kind of abreast of this and looking at the process and making sure that we're hitting all the markers that we need to from a fire department standpoint and a city standpoint, and all the LDO staff that helps out with this. We're learning some things that what I like about the process alone is that we're able to take some actionable items. And I think that's the important takeaway to avoid any kind of tragedy that might happen like this in the future. But with that, I can take any questions you have on related incidents, but I'll turn it over to Donna Castile if you don't. Yes,
Hold
sir.
on just one second. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. I see Dallas here, and I'll ask you too, Chief. I'm assuming you all work together in reporting, and can you tell me if there's anything we need to do a little bit better in getting these buildings condemned faster and on the fast track? And I'm going to go right to Donna for that one when she comes up to get these in line for demolition.
I will say this: we work well with every time we call Dallas, he's coming out. I mean, we call him in the middle of the night at times to condemn buildings, and that's a strain on the LDO office alone. And maybe there's some areas there that we could help with, but the communication goes well. We share a lot of information. They could see that there are always areas to clean that up. And that's kind of what we've identified in some of the processes that I'll let Julie speak on.
I figured that was a strong partnership. I think for the record,
Absolutely.
I want people to know that you all are working together on that.
Absolutely.
And thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Chief,
Yes.
and I don't know if you or maybe Donna can answer this question. So we've had a number of calls to this location.
Mhm.
When was the property condemned?
I'll let Donna share the timeline,
Okay. All right.
kind of how that process worked.
Okay. The property actually was not condemned until December 9th of 21. Prior to that, the last housing case that we had was in
Oh, it says-
2016
it's
on
right
that
there. It says-
property. So the fire department had contacted one of our inspectors, and he went out on December 9th and he condemned the structure and sent a notice of violation to the property owner, asking the owner to secure the property. Back in 2016, that particular structure case also was related to securing the property, and the property was secured in 2016. And so we were not called back there until December 9th of 21. And so the inspector intended to take it to the January 19th demolition hearing after sending the notice asking for the property to be secured. But prior to that, of course, the second fire occurred on January 9th. And then after that, we were able to get in touch with one of the property owners and pressed upon him the need for him to clean up the debris from the structure collapse, or from the structure basically being pushed over and piled up. And so he did go ahead and have that property cleaned up. Since then, we have worked on setting up maybe some better ways to communicate. In February, the fire department had started sending us copies of their press releases so that we knew what addresses had fires. And so from that point on, I have been assigning an inspector to go out anywhere that a fire has occurred, so that we can condemn as needed, follow up with demolition if needed, or boarding, and to keep an eye on those. And then since the fire on Fourth Avenue, we have set up some shared emails where we can notify each other of dangerous properties. And then we are also sharing our condemned list with CFD and CPD. And also that will have additional information as far as properties that are going for demolition or have been demolished. And we also have shared maps at this point that were set up by the mayor's office.
Okay. Hold on one second. Councilman Ledford?
Thank you, Chairman. I really, this was a really tragic incident with the loss of a life, and thankfully not for one of our firefighters, although probably life altering. And I want to make sure we all understand what the process is when we go through this. So Donna, help me out. When a property is condemned and the contacts leading up to that with a property owner, I own commercial property, and I'm paranoid of keeping it in its condition that needs, that's primo, because that is my property. It's my liability. But it feels like at times folks just keep getting pushed or passes on property getting worse and worse and worse. And then the taxpayers end up paying the bill to have it demolished. And I'm trying to figure out, when does this responsibility shift to the property owners, and what do we do about it? Obviously, this is a bad building. It has a history, and there's probably dozens more like it in the city. But let me back that up and say, in the essence of public safety, which is one of our charter mandates and one of our moral responsibilities that we provide for the city, I understand why we do it. I'm not questioning that, but I'm questioning the liability of the property owner to just go on and on and on. And if you could talk a little bit about that and help me understand why that is allowed, I think it would help me.
Okay. Well, and of course, even in this situation, I would assume that the property owner had some liability, especially if they were aware of the situation and they didn't take action. And even if they had left the pile there and did not clean it up and someone was injured in that, they would leave themselves open for a lawsuit, I'm sure. For us, whenever a structure is condemned, the property is posted with condemnation signs immediately. If it needs to be boarded, a public nuisance notice is also posted to the property immediately and mailed out. One thing that we previously had been using very sparingly was the emergency boarding process, which would allow us to move forward with boarding immediately, just as soon as we can get someone over there, which may be the same day or the next day. And so that was discussed as we've talked through these processes and ways to speed things up. And so at this point, we are using emergency boarding for structures that are open and appear to have had activity. For us, typically, if a structure is to be boarded, we send out the public nuisance notice and post the property, and the owner has 10 days to board it up. And if they don't do it, then we board it up for them. We place the lien against their property. And we do the same thing if it's a vacant property with litter and overgrowth. And then for demolitions, we post the property with the demolition hearing notice. We mail out letters to the owner and all interested parties and lien holders. We advertise it in the paper twice before the hearing. At the demolition hearing, which are typically held every other month, sometimes we add an extra hearing. So we did have a hearing in January. We're having one in February, and we'll have one in March. If owners attend and they have a plan to repair the property, many times those cases are passed by the public officer. If someone appears with a specific plan to make repairs, and then if they show that they are making improvements, a lot of times those cases are passed repeatedly.
So when I'm looking at this building, and if I were the property owner, just help me understand this. It went from standing and a public nuisance, if you will. Thank you, Phil. You taught me that one. To someone losing their life, and possibly one of our firefighters, to now a nice cleaned off piece of property that is probably very appealing for sale. So do we have a lien on that property? And if we do, if it were to sell, are we collecting back the money that it took for all the effort? Is that calculated into? I'm trying to get a return
Sure.
on the investment in public safety, if you want to phrase it that way, because right now that's an appealing piece of property. And I want to make sure the taxpayers and I certainly don't want to risk our firefighters to make that a more appealable piece of property, but I am interested in following that trail.
Okay, so in this particular case, after the second fire and the building was pushed down and it was just a pile of rubble, I contacted the owner and explained our process that basically if he didn't clean it up quickly, we would be over there cleaning it up, but we would have to treat it like a demolition because it was previously a building. And I told him that we were rushing it to take it to the January 19th demolition hearing. And if he did not go ahead and take care of it prior to that, we would get our order and we would proceed. But so he went ahead and cleaned it up himself. So since code enforcement did not send a demolition contractor over there to clean it up, there is no lien. If code enforcement had sent our contractor over there, then we would have placed a lien for the cost. I don't know that
So-
there's,
So would you say there's a financial gap in certain cases?
as well as far as the fire department having the building pushed down by Public Works, there may have been some cost involved there. And maybe
Fair,
there's
yeah.
an opportunity to collect. I don't really know about that because that is not in my division and I'm not aware of any other type of liens.
I just want to make sure that if there's something we could identify as a group, all of us working together, if the city can be made whole, the taxpayers made reimbursed for these efforts. I'm just trying to figure out if people can use this situation to get a better situation for themselves, and all the while people's lives are being at risk. That's something I think we would all be concerned about. And then again, be made whole, the city being made whole for that. And I feel like there's some gaps maybe we could look at, but I do appreciate you walking me through that. Chairman, thanks for the opportunity to ask those questions.
Thank you. So Donna, my question is this. I'm not sure. And so looks like the history goes back all the way to 2017. And I'm not sure if it was vacant or in a condemnable state at that point, but we've gone from 2017 to 2021 before we condemned the structure. Now, we certainly can't demolish it until the condemnation process has started. So it looks like to me that the condemnation is the trigger to getting the building tore down. So I guess my question is, working with EMS, working with the fire department, is it possible to identify these structures sooner
Yes.
so that we can get this process started? Because like I said, we can't tear it down to at least we condemn it. So what I'm really looking for is, how do we start this process sooner?
Okay, so I believe that we have a better source of communication set up at this point
Okay.
so that CFD and CPD can contact us. Any structures that we need to go look at, we will take care of it immediately. And we simply had not actually had complaints about that building since 2016. So
Was it in a,
Uh-huh.
so you're not sure when it was really in a condemnable state though, correct? Or,
It may have been condemnable in 2016 when the inspector looked at it at that time. The notes basically said it was a sturdy brick structure. And it had the back door, I think, was open at that time and needed to be secured. The owner secured it and the case was closed.
okay.
So with us, we do try to, like structures that have been condemned or have been boarded for a long period of time, We focus on looking back at those, especially during the winter months when we're not dealing with as much overgrowth, and inspectors maybe have a little bit more time. For the most part, we spend a lot of time following up on properties that we are notified that we need to inspect from other departments and 311 complaints. Then, of course, the inspectors go out and check, any violations that they see along the way, they write up. But we stay extremely busy, but we do follow up on condemned properties and boarded properties to see if they have deteriorated to a point that they meet demolition criteria.
Okay.
If the inspector sees that it meets demolition criteria the first time that he or she goes out, then we do try to proceed with that process
Okay.
immediately.
Julia, I think this may be something we want to follow up with in the next 6 months or so and see what the communication has looked like between CPD and the fire department and EMS or whatever, and to see if we're getting more references for condemned buildings, or if we're condemning more. I mean, this is certainly something that we need to address so that there's no reason for this situation to happen again.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. There are 2 slides that'll give you a kind of a quick glance, and I'll be very brief.
Let
'Cause-
me
yeah, go
get
ahead.
Councilwoman Burr's question before you
Yeah.
begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess, Don, I needed a question for you, please. So once we have knowledge that something's condemnable, dangerous, then it sounds like a lot of bureaucratic stuff happens. And yet I keep thinking that somebody died. Sure, they may have been wrongfully there. But the bottom line is, once we have knowledge that something's condemnable, then and we give notice to the owner, then do we think that we have no more liability?
Okay, if something is condemnable, we do condemn it immediately on the spot, and the signs are posted before the owner is even notified. We also post a public nuisance if the structure is open or needs some other type of work that the city is able to work to perform. Basically, the public nuisance says this structure needs to be boarded up or mowed or litter cleaned up. And if you don't do it, the city's going to do it in 10 days and we're going to place a lien on your property for the cost. That's really what the public nuisance is. And so generally, we wait the 10 days. But if it's a possible life safety issue, then we can move forward with an emergency boarding. Again, that is something that previously we used very sparingly, usually after a fire where maybe a structure like the back half was completely open. And we had tended to use that very sparingly. But at this point, we are moving forward with emergency boarding. We've got 2 going right now. And Phil Noblet told us that we can still place liens, which that's really wonderful. And so as much as our vendor can keep up, we will move forward with the emergency
I'm
boarding.
just suggesting, I was hearing this is just a question, a concern I've got. What I heard with this particular property, I was listening all the way through and to what my colleagues were saying. And the thing is that, do we think that once we have said this is condemnable, boarded up, that we've done our due and that we no longer are responsible for anything?
We don't feel that we're not responsible. The inspector intended to take this to the January demolition hearing, but the second fire occurred prior to that and the structure was pushed down. Of course, we were still going to use the demolition hearing to clean up the debris if the owner had not done it.
All right, when was it officially condemned?
December 9th.
And it's been problematic for a while, right?
Not that we were aware of.
We didn't know anything about this building before December 9th.
Okay, code enforcement knew about the building in 2016. And and had the owner boarded up at that time. We did not have any complaints about the building since then. I don't know.
Well, okay, I guess that's my question.
Okay.
So the minute we have knowledge, we're responsible for something happening, whether it's to the owner or because we have knowledge of that, right?
Yes.
And so do we go by the fact if nobody's complained, then it must be okay?
No, we look for violation issues. One thing I guess that's important for me to point out is that basically the codes that we enforce refer to residential properties. They actually don't refer to commercial properties. And we had not been focusing at all on commercial properties other than properties that had been brought to our attention until recently when the mayor's office said that they do want us to actively inspect and enforce codes on commercial properties as well.
Which is probably a really good idea. I mean, this isn't, all I'm saying is from listening to all of this, I think, and maybe this isn't a discussion for now, but it seems like in some areas we think or used to think that just because we've sent notices or somebody's put a board up, we have knowledge that this is a dangerous situation. So unless we can show we're continually inspecting or unless we're showing something, I think we may want to take a look at exactly what the mayor's office said, and that is we need to affirmatively look at these things because my stomach just tells me, maybe the law too, that we have some liability if we have knowledge
Okay.
and
we-
nothing happens. And it's not a criticism, it's a point of discussion. And I agree with the chair that we probably need to not discuss it now, but
Yes.
really look at it further. Those are just the comments, Mr. Chair. It's not a criticism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to add that we are very proactive. We do follow up on condemned properties. This was not condemned until December 9th, and it was not really on our radar. So I wish that, it had been, but it was not. And we do try to get things to demolition as quickly as we possibly can, as quickly as we legally can. And we do focus on the most dangerous first. And we have to kind of take the very worst first because our budget is usually expended before we get through everything.
Sure. Thank you.
Did you have a couple of slides you want to show really quick?
I have
'Cause
two
'cause we
slides,
do
and I will
have-
be
We do have an
very
attorney
swift.
client that we need to
Yes.
make room for. Okay.
I'll be very swift. So, and this is some stuff that we can follow up on in 6 months from now as well. Adrian, you can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So, as a part of this process after the fact, we got a group of about 17 folks together across the fire department, police department, homeless services, codes enforcement, land development office, and the city attorney's office to talk about this process. I mean, think about talking through how to tie your shoe. That's how we worked through this process from property condemned to demolition or resolution with the property owner. Identified 3 major gaps, which were some of these gray areas in the process, emergency boarding being one of them that we cleared up. The timeline to secure these properties, as Donna mentioned, there's the 10-day public nuisance notice, and then we allow 2 weeks for our contractor to come out and put up those boards. So that's potentially a month that structure is open. And once somebody gets in, they're more likely to come back and try to get in again, even after it's boarded up. So that was another big gap. And then thirdly, just the opportunity to really increase our communication across these different agencies, to Councilwoman Burr's point of how do we get these properties condemned on the front end if we're communicating better, talking on a regular basis about, hey, we're noticing some issues here, we can get them going through that process. So if you'll go to the next slide for me. Some three major takeaways that we had were really just around the process improvement itself. So we identified those areas of improvement around securing the properties quickly. And so emergency boarding, we know now, is an option that we are able to use in more cases than we had been previously. Still not something that we're going to use in every single case, but in cases where it is a major safety risk, being able to go ahead and move forward with that. as well as just moving properties along through the process. So to Donna's point, their team really works to keep those properties moving. But if we're not all communicating, we don't necessarily know that another property has become more of an issue because CPD or CFD is having to respond there more regularly. So with that communication sharing, there's also a big piece of data sharing there. So we now have an internal dashboard where we are able to map out these properties and also see with an overlay of police and fire incidents. And so we know what are our top 10 properties that are a big problem right now. And there will be standing meetings, again, to that task force and improved communication, standing meetings with this same group moving forward to continue the conversation on what can we do better, but also what can we do to keep moving these properties along. And that information and that data will also be shared with our 911 center. So when firefighters and police officers are going out and responding to a call, they know that they're responding to a condemned property. A lot of times those signs get taken down outside of the property, or they may or may not see the boarding. And so knowing on the front end, this is a high-risk situation for myself in terms of my safety, knowing that I may have to navigate this a little bit differently when I go into the property if the property is able to be entered. Also knowing that there could be people here in terms of this may be a space where our homeless neighbors may have taken up residency. So all of these things hoping to culminate into some improved processes and improved outcomes. And so we'll come back in 6 months, tell you a little bit about what else has needed to change over those 6 months, and then how this has helped the process as well.
Thank you, Joe. That's, I like the moving forward piece. Councilman Ledford, burning question. Can't wait. You're good? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Julia, thanks so much. Council, I think we do need an attorney-client, which I've got a feeling we will not have enough time to cover everything. We may have to address it after the 3:30 meeting, if possible. Tell you what, we'll go now, get us started, and then we'll come back at 3:30. So at this time, we'll adjourn this meeting. See you back at 3:30. Yeah, we'll go in the conference. Let's go in the conference room.
How are you doing? Good.
Can I come back tomorrow? Last Tuesday.
That's good.
It feels good to, for a month, I'll be consistent. It's nice that I'm not with a gun.
Hey, Chris.
About charging me more money.
I just wanted to give you a hug.
Thank you, darling.
Glad you're back.
I'm glad to be back.
Hold on.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great.
I'm enjoying your
I know we get time. They come and rest in my district like I don't want to interview this.
I need to meet with you on it. Now, here's the thing with your redistricting. You've got to have X number of people. You got to have plus or minus 10% of 20,155 people in your district. Right now, it's the smallest, so it's got to gain.
I need some people.
And I know one thing that's unavoidable is you're going to have all of Highland Park now, not just half of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I know you want it,
yeah.
but we guarantee that.
Okay,
And now nobody's caring about District 8, so it doesn't matter.
yeah. That's good. Yeah. Okay, well, let's look at it. I'm really concerned about those people, like, maybe we could put that point. Back in 7
Well,
What's
7 can't take any more voters. 7's the second biggest district in the city. Yeah, 7, she can't, she's got to lose. She had to lose voters. The only one bigger than hers is Darren's.
All right.
So I'll show it to you, but there's a lot of restrictions put on by the state and by the federal court order. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you give me until tomorrow to schedule something with you, we can meet on Thursday or Friday. I didn't get back here until like 1:30 today. So I've been sitting here going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ronald just called me. He was like, please tell them.
That's why he called me.
He just said I could hear their entire conversation about redistricting. Oh, yeah, I think it's fine.
Well, a lot of people that are opening new stores, restaurants, beer brewery places that are doing.
I come from it was like if we had time, I was like, yeah.
So that's what we're here to do. Because I mean, when things go sour and break the rules, and get caught, come back. But this same group, when we get to have the back of our sentence, so it's like fine, or suspension license. We also get records. Trying to figure out where that's actually saving us. To be able to send records of breakers years, they come back. New companies
I was. Yeah, that's new. Nobody was.
This is really, in comparison with the planning commission, it's ground level, and it goes up. Right, and it's a bigger mess now. Because we are asking to show up. Yeah. And they understand what's somebody down there that lucky.
Yeah. And so that's what. So like for all those years, that's why.
I'm sitting up there, that's crazy.
But I mean, now there's this.
Right.